So this text is undoubtedly a very seminal text because it reflects the racial problem, corrosive racial problem, especially between the Africans and Afro-Americans and Americans. The bitterness that existed between these two races in America generated lots of evils in the society, lots of traumas. So this very particular topic, that is racial crisis of American society, has become a nucleus of this text. And if you peep into the plot of this text, you will find this is about the protagonist Sidi. So Sidi is the protagonist, but the title of this text is Beloved, who is supposedly considered to be the assassinated daughter of Sidi. And this very character, Beloved, is flavored with supernaturalism. And the supernatural flavor that runs around this character contributes immensely to creating an atmosphere of magic realism in this text. So technically, it's a very seminal text. And at the same time, if you think of its subject matter, then you must think that it is really a very important text. Okay. Now, I like to tell you in brief about the story of this text. Actually, this text tells us about Sidi, how Sidi manages the realities in her life in 124 Bluestone Road house. So Sidi is living there with her mother-in-law, Baby Suggs. Baby Suggs was also a slave, and she also worked. She also served in the sweet home. The sweet home is the farmhouse of a school teacher. The school teacher is represented here as a master. His cruelty, his brutality, and the way he exercises his inexorable behavior upon the slaves in the farmhouse have been depicted very minutely and meticulously in this text. And at the same time, the character of Sidi represents the slave community of America. The slave community, that is the slaves who fell victim to the cruelties and atrocities inflicted upon the black slaves by the white masters. So the school teacher represents the master, the torturing master, oppressive master, or persecuting master. And on the contrary, Sidi represents the persecuted or tortured or oppressed slave. So in this way, we find two parties in this novel. Sidi representing the black community of slaves, and the school teacher representing the white master. So the conflict is going on between these two parties. And this conflict is taking place not on the equal ground. It is taking place in the ground of injustice, in the ground of persecution, in the ground of unequal treatment of these two communities. Now, in this novel, we find that Sidi, who was a slave in the sweet home, escaped the sweet home once while she was pregnant. And on her way to escape the sweet home, she gave birth to her child, that is her eldest daughter. her daughter, the only daughter who was surviving with her, living with her. The name of the daughter was Denver. Actually, Denver was the name borrowed from a white girl who helped Sidi during her labor pain and during her delivery of this child. So Sidi was so pleased with that very white girl that she borrowed her name and she named her child, that is daughter, after her name, Denmark. So this very incident is also significant and it requires a critical analysis. It gives us an impression that all the white people were not in favor of slavery. Some white people were there who did not support slavery. It is true, all the Americans are not bad. Yes, they have a very common national feeling, but individually, if you think of them individually, you will find many good Americans. For example, in 1963, while Martin Luther King delivered his speech, I have a dream. You must have heard of this speech, I have a dream. So Martin Luther King delivered this speech in Lincoln Square of Washington. And there, many white Americans were present. They participated in the congregation. They supported Martin Luther King. So this is one of the examples which can give us an impression that all the Americans were not individually in favor of slavery. So anyway, this incident is also helping the novelist to bring about a balance in her portrayal or depiction of two different races in the singular canvas of this novel. You must not call Toni Morrison a racist. She is not a racist. If she blindly supports the black people and blindly condemns the white Americans, then we might have called her a racist. But now we cannot call her a racist. Understand? So this incident is depicted here with a particular aim to bring about an atmosphere of balance and harmony. All right, just think of this. So why does a white American girl help a black slave named Sidi? So the atmosphere of cooperation, atmosphere of fellow feeling, atmosphere of association existed in American society, though the atmosphere of brutality superseded the atmosphere of friendliness. So that very incident, that is the juxtaposition of good and evil, is depicted in the plot of this novel. Anyway, Sidi somehow managed to escape from the sweet home. Why? Because the sweet home was a repository of torture. It was a storehouse of persecution. The school teacher, just think of the name or think of the identity of the slave master, a school teacher. Our teacher is to be well educated. But this very man's education persuaded him to enslave other human beings who are of different colors or complexion. So education is not always successful. Education is sometimes a failure. Education is sometimes manipulated. Suppose if you think of our country, there are many well-educated persons, so-called well-educated persons, and they're holding different important positions in the country, in the government, in the social activities, in political atmosphere. They're holding or they are occupying different important positions. But many of them are corrupted. Many of their ideas and ideals are manipulated by their superstition, bigotry, and parochialism, narrowness of their thinking. So why does this happen? It happens because their education fails. Okay, so this very thing is also depicted through the character of the school teacher, who is the master of the house of the sweet home. So anyway, another important and inhuman incident that you have to mark, that all the slaves in the sweet home are called Paul. Suppose Paul A, Paul B, Paul C, Paul D. So they don't have their identity, they don't have their names. So this is undoubtedly a colonial practice. In colonial practice, we find that the colonizers try their best to distort the identity and names of the natives of the colonized. So why do they do so? They do it with a deliberate intention to translate them or to transform them into others, into marginalized. They also do it with a deliberate purpose of occupying the center of power of the society and leading the natives towards the periphery of the society, towards the margin of the society. So branding, naming, or distorting identity, all these attempts are done with deliberate purpose of exploitation. The only objective of this naming is to exploit, is to distort the identity, or is to transform the natives into others. Okay. So thus we find a lot of areas of thinking in this text. Remember, a lot of things, a lot of areas, a lot of sites you will find in this text where you will have to explore different issues of the society very critically and analytically. So anyways, Sidi somehow managed to escape, and ultimately she took shelter in the house of her mother-in-law. The name of her mother-in-law is Baby Sykes. And she was living in Ohio State, Cincinnati, the road number 124 Bluestone. So the name of this particular location, 124, the number, it is a mysterious number, because if you add 1 plus 2 plus 4, the equation will be 7. So this 7 is a mysterious number. And you know that this 7, 30, 9, 3, these numbers are used very commonly in romantic texts, the texts which offer a mysterious and supernatural atmosphere. And these numbers are also very common in S.T. Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Okay. As you have gone through this text, I think you can recollect this text. So Coleridge very powerfully used these numbers to create an atmosphere of mystery and supernatural vibe in his text. So anyway, Sidi was living there, but one day the school teacher and 3 other persons, that is in total 4 persons, came to snatch away Sidi and her children back to that farmhouse. But Sidi did not want that she and her children should go back to the life of slavery. Sidi was a very careful mother, caring mother, and she did never want that her children should be slaves again. For that reason, she took her children to the woodshed, which was adjacent to her home. She took the children to the woodshed, and with an electronic saw, she slaughtered her eldest daughter. And while she was attempting to slaughter the other children, she was caught red-handed, and she could not implement her desire of assassinating the children. Okay, her two sons, she had two sons also. One was Howard and the other was Bugler. These two sons, while they were 13, they fled away from home. Only the youngest daughter, Denver, was living with Sidney. Okay, so this very incident, why did Sidney want to kill her children? You can bring about a parallelism between Sidney and Medea. You have read the drama Medea by Euripides, and in Medea we find that mother Medea slaughtered her child. She killed her son. So why did she kill her son? We know that motherly affection is incomparable. Motherly affection can never be compared with anything on this earth. But in what situation or under what circumstances a mother ventures to kill her children? Why does a woman commit infanticide? So if you investigate this issue, you will find that because of trauma or because of the acute sense of insecurity, a woman may commit such kind of brutal action or diabolical action. So Sidney killed her child and she decided to kill her other children. Why? Because she thought that death was an escape from this inexorable, intolerable slavery, inhuman slavery. So while in a society, a man or a woman does not have any alternative to live peacefully or live happily, then he or she may take such desperate decision. And for that reason, you cannot blame a woman. You have to blame the system. So why does Sidney kill her child? The answer to this question is lying in the existing system of American society during the Civil War or during that very precarious situation while the slave fugitive law was implementing, and the masters of the slaves became very much desperate and inhuman, and they tried to reclaim their slaves to their home and inflicted more torture upon them. So Sidney did not have any alternative except killing her children to set them free from this brutal practice of slavery in American society. Okay, so Sidney's desperate action helps us understand or invites us to examine American society very critically. Similarly, if you think of Medea's incident of killing her child, you will easily understand how the women were treated, how inhumanly, how humiliatingly women were treated in the then society. So women did not have any alternative except killing their children and setting them free from this brutality. Because Medea also thought that if her son grows up, he will follow the same track of his father. He will also be a deceiver. He will also be a betrayer. He will also be a cheat. He will also underestimate other women. But she would not let it be so. For that reason, she took up desperate decision of killing her child. So she killed her child. Okay. Similarly, we find the same thing in this text. Sidney killed her child. Why? Because she did not have any alternative. She thought that killing means setting them free from slavery. The society will not let them live freely. For that reason, she arranged freedom for them. And only way to set them free is to kill them. So just you should not condemn Siddhi, or you should not think of the brutality that was taken up by Siddhi. You just think of the system which compelled Siddhi to take up such a desperate decision. Anyway, Siddhi could kill only her eldest daughter, and the other children were not assassinated because she was intervened. Anyway, she started living in the house 124 Bluestone Road, and Paul D, who was another slave of Sweet Hope, also started living in the house, and he was trying to take care of the family. Actually, he had a plan to marry Siddhi and live together with her. But one day, while they came back from outside to the home, they found a young girl who was wet. Her whole body was wet. It seemed she came out of water, and she was sitting on the doorstep. But before that very incident, some other supernatural incidents have been described. That is, in the room of Siddhi, sometimes the utensils and other furnitures were thrown away here and there, invisible. But who did it is not visible. But the utensils of the room were thrown this way or that. So that was really a very fearful incident. The house was a haunted house. It was a haunted house. Anyway, in such a very precarious situation, one day Siddhi and Paul D and other children met a girl, mysterious girl, who was sitting at the doorstep. And while Siddhi asked the name, the girl told her that she was beloved, that she did not have any name, she was beloved. And from the very beginning, Siddhi developed a kind of soft corner for the daughter. And coincidentally, she started thinking that she was the daughter whom she assassinated. So that very daughter might have come back from the world of death. Okay. So in such a very situation, or such a very crucial situation, there was a dramatic change in the life of Siddhi. The change was that after the appearance of this mysterious girl, that is beloved, all those supernatural incidents or mysterious incidents, for example, the throwing of utensils from here to there or there to here, stopped. All those incidents stopped. So Siddhi could not discover the identity of beloved. She was mysterious, and in this way, the time passed on, and the whole house and all other members of the house were confined because the society or the other people did not show much interest in the members of the house, because they were isolated from the society. There was a kind of isolation because the house was haunted, and baby Sachs also died in her bed one night. So all these incidents contributed to the mysterious atmosphere of the plot of this novel. And Paul D suspected that beloved was not an ordinary woman, but Siddhi did not believe it. So there was a conflict between Siddhi and Paul D. Paul D suspected that beloved was a spirit, because after the appearance of beloved, Paul D could not sleep in his room. He could not feel comfortable. He could not sleep well. So he left his room and he started sleeping here and there, sometimes in wood shop, sometimes in some other place. So one night, Paul D was taken up or seduced by Beloved. And there was a sexual relationship between Paul D and Beloved. But mysteriously, after that very relationship, Paul D could recollect the sorrowful, nightmarish experiences that he had in his previous life of slavery. So in this way, we find that Beloved's appearance or Beloved's relationship with Paul D was a kind of stimulation of the past, or the stimulation of the cruelties and atrocities that Paul D and other slaves experienced in their previous life. So Beloved just invigorated the traumas that all these characters had in their life. Okay. So anyway, in such a very situation, Paul D became abstracted, and he could not concentrate to any of the activities of the house, and he seemed to be a sort of fleeting personality. That is, he could not concentrate on his home, or he could not concentrate on his relationship with Siddhi. Siddhi was also becoming a sort of obsessed with Beloved, and she was getting emaciated. That is, she was getting emaciated means she was getting sick and losing her health, and she was gradually getting confined to her bed. On the other hand, Beloved was getting fat. Beloved was getting her health, or acquiring health. So there was a contrast between Siddhi and Beloved. So while this condition goes on and goes on, in course of time, suddenly one day, the Beloved disappeared. The Beloved disappeared. But after the disappearance of the Beloved, Siddhi could not take it easy, because by this time she developed a kind of soft corner and attachment with Beloved. So while Beloved disappeared, she was distraught with tension, anxiety, and frustration. She was distraught with tension and frustration. So she was confined to her bed. And there was another dramatic incident, a dramatic change after the disappearance of the Beloved. After the disappearance of the Beloved, the society, or the people of the society, became a bit interested, and they felt humane passion or impulses for the members of this family. Suppose Siddhi's daughter Denver got a job. She got a job, and that very incident gave us an idea that she would be able to bring about solvency to the family, or she was getting self-reliant, or she was not going to take up the job or take up the life of a slave. So in this way, we find a dramatic change after the disappearance of the Beloved. And the villagers, that is the people of the locality, came to the house to exorcise the spirit. Exorcise means to drive away the spirit with some spells from the Bible or some other holy books. So thus we find that while this house was haunted, or while the spirit of Beloved was residing in this house, the house was segregated from the society and from the people of the society. But as soon as the Beloved disappeared, there was a dramatic change in the lifestyle, in the career of all the members of this family. So in this way, we find that this novel is juxtaposing natural and unnatural, real and unreal, natural and supernatural. And by creating an atmosphere of magic realism, magic realism is a technique in which the real is interpreted through unreal. Okay, the real would appear to be unreal. Suppose you are a girl, suppose you are standing in front of a mirror, suddenly you feel that you are nowhere. Suddenly you feel that you have lost your name. Suddenly you feel that you have lost your entity in the society. But you are real, you are flesh and blood, you have your appearance, you have your complexion, you have your conscious, but suddenly you discover that you are nowhere. So you are unreal. So the juxtaposition between real and unreal brings about an atmosphere, or brings about an impression. That very impression is known as the impression of magic realism. And magic realism is a very popular technique. And this technique is very popular in Latin American literature. If you think of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, you will find this technique used very abundantly in his writing. And you will also find this technique used very abundantly in African literature, even in our literature. If you read Lal Shalu by Soed Waliullah, you will find some situations in which the writer has applied the technique of magic realism. Sometimes in the dead of night, Majid looks at his Majar and thinks that there is nobody in the Majar. But very cunningly, he uses this tool to exploit the innocent or naive villagers. So he believes that Majar is the source of his power. And sometimes he feels that the Majar is nowhere. So we find the juxtaposition between real and unreal, the same creation. For that reason, an atmosphere of magic realism is used here. In some of the writings of Soed Waliullah, you will find the use of this technique, the magic realism. So we find here the same technique. Anyway, that is the end of this novel. That is, the beloved disappears and the family of Sidi very gradually takes resort to the confidence of the other people of the society. They are also cooperated by the people of the society. And in this way, they get together with the other persons, with the other people of the society. So this novel ends with an optimistic message. So what's that message? The reunion. The novel thoroughly describes the story of segregation. Sidi was segregated from her root, from the society, from her family. But ultimately, towards the end of this novel, we find that Sidi develops a kind of social relationship with the other people of the society. So thus we find a shifting from segregation to society. Society means living together. Society means sharing and caring. Society means living together. And segregation means alienated from the society. So at the very beginning, we find, or from the very beginning, we got an atmosphere of segregation. Sidi was the victim of segregation. But ultimately, we find that she is getting together with the society, or the other members of the society. Suppose Denver is getting a job and she is uniting herself with the society. So this novel depicts the picture of an evolution of the history of the Black slaves in America. The slaves who were once living inhuman life in slavery, ultimately or gradually were getting or were advancing towards a society where they would live together. In this way, Toni Morrison has created an atmosphere of social life, a life of mutual cooperation, a life of mutual association. Okay. This novel is a psychological novel because if you think of Sidi's attempt of assassinating her children, that very incident is enough for us to analyze this text psychologically. So why does a man or a woman grow desperate and take up such a desperate or brutal decision? When a man is traumatized, or why a woman is traumatized, or different traumas and different other maladies of the society are accumulated in her mind or in her psychology. And while she cannot bring about a kind of harmony among all these segregated or different ideas and different traumas of different experiences, then he or she felt lost. And this feeling of loss may lead her or him to a desperate action. So thus we find that this novel is also a psychological. It is also a social novel because it helps us understand the social condition of America. It is a political novel also because the Slave Reclamation Act or the Slave Fugitive Act, which was passed by American Parliament, which was also used to reclaim the slaves, to catch them, bring them back, and torture them. So these incidents help us analyze this text politically. It is also a text of racial crisis, the crisis that emerges out of the racial segregation or the racial differences between the Afro-Americans and the Americans. The Afro-Americans are usually constituted by the Africans in origin, but Americans in nationality. And the Americans are Americans, white people, white Americans. The white Americans did never want that the Afro-Americans should be in the mainstream of economy, in the mainstream of politics or other enterprises of the society. They did never want to let them come in the mainstream of economy. But the Black people wanted to take their place in the mainstream of economy. That was the cause of conflict. And that very conflict ultimately took up the shape of brutality. And we find this implemented